What's up, guys? It's your boy Dalpal. I'm just out here. I just finished rewatching Avatar: The Last Airbender for probably about the 5th time, and I loved it just as much as every other time. So in celebration, I decided to make a quick video highlighting my 11 favorite episodes from the series. I'm curious about you guys, what you think the best episodes are, so let me know down in the comments. But without further ado, let's just get into it. Okay, so my 11th pick is Book 3, Chapter 5, The Beach. I'll just get this out of the way. It's the first episode that we see Sparky Boom Man fight Team Avatar, and that has some super awesome combat scenes in it, like when Aang slow motion cushions the explosion and just it's awesome. It's super dope. So the majority of this episode has to do with the bad guys, but honestly just feels like a fun teen movie. Like the bonfire scene is one of my favorite scenes of this episode, because you get to see a different side of these characters, like May, Ty Lee, and Azula, that you don't normally get to see. And then it really highlights kind of Zuko's struggle that he's going through right now. I really like that part of the episode. And I especially think that this episode's important for Azula, because this is probably the most humanity you ever see out of her throughout the show. Like when she flirts with Chang or whatever his name is, and then she talks about how she feels bad that her own mother doesn't even love her. In general, you're seeing a side of these characters that you don't see very often in the show. Okay, so my number 10 pick is Book 2, Chapter 7, which is Zuko Alone. I think we all know that Zuko's character arc is one of the best parts of this show. And this episode really highlights his backstory and gives us a lot of background knowledge that we didn't have before. And the title of this episode kind of takes on a whole new meaning when you realize that not only is he physically alone, but he's banished from his country. He's separated from the only family members that love him, which would be Iroh and his mom. And then he can't really be accepted anywhere else because he's a firebender in the Earth Kingdom. And I think that's a really interesting dynamic, that not only is he physically alone, but he really is entirely alone in all senses of the word. Also, it's just fun to point out, Azula in the flashback makes fun of Zuko for not even being good at playing with his knife. And then in this episode, you see Zuko just absolutely destroy some thugs with his two-handed swords. Like, it's awesome. Okay, so my number 9 pick is Book 2, Chapter 11, The Desert. So everybody in this episode is at a low point. They're all just basically trying to survive. It's also the first episode that we get introduced to the White Lotus, the organization officially, and I love that part of the show. I think it's so cool. And while the buzzard wasps are pretty rad, and Sokka on cactus juice just tripping is iconic always, the main part of this episode, the reason that I included it, is Aang and his struggle in having lost Appa. Aang is going through this kind of turmoil. At first he starts with like this determination that he's going to find Appa at all costs. Then he goes to this hopelessness that he has no idea where he is. He just kind of gives up hope on even leaving the desert. Then he gets angry and then just ends with sadness. And I think it's really impactful because you don't normally see Aang like this in the show. Like the same kid who's always saying peace is the best option, all life is sacred, is all of a sudden just knocking down buzzard wasps, just slamming down buzzard wasps and just destroying sand gliders. And you can really tell that he's just kind of lost control because of this deep emotion that he's feeling. And I think that's a really interesting point of the show. For me, rewatching the show, Aang crying in the Avatar state at the end of the episode is maybe one of the most emotional parts of the whole series. You really feel that pain that he's feeling. So my number 8 pick is Book 1, Chapters 19 and 20. I don't know if this is cheating or not, but I did a 2-parter for this one. It's the season finale, Siege of the North. These are the only episodes I have from Season 1 on this list. I just think that Season 2 and Season 3 are generally better. But man, these 2 episodes for the season finale are really good. I mean, you see Zuko's insane determination, you see Yue's sacrifice, which is pretty awesome, and then you get a really like mysterious look at the spirit world. Like, who's this giant wolf guy, and who's this monkey dude? It's like you don't even need to know. Like, the spirit world is mysterious, and that's what I love so much about the spirit world in Avatar, is that you never really get a full understanding of what it is, how it works, who lives there, and I really like that about the show. And speaking of the spirit world, Ko, the face stealer, he's super cool, super creepy, and most of all memorable. That's what I think I love most about him, is that even though he has very little screen time, he makes a big impact and you'll remember him for a while. Then obviously all the red moon scenes and then the black and white scenes are super beautiful artistically, especially when they're firebending. Iroh is just an absolute beast in this episode, but the firebending looks super cool. And this shot right here is probably my favorite shot in season 1. I just get the chills every time. And then he just turns into the giant ocean spirit monster, and just the ocean spirit with Avatar Aang just destroying the Fire Nation. I love the end of season 1. I think they ended it very well. And they brought it up to a level where they could still outdo it in season 2s and 3s, but it was definitely the coolest thing we had seen up to that point in season 1. Okay, so my number 7 pick is Book 3, Chapter 2, The Headband. This one might be a surprise for some people. It's not commonly one that you think of as like the iconic episodes, but I included this one mainly because I love the show for the serious moments, for the funny moments, and I think this episode is kind of the epitome of the filler episodes. So like, it doesn't have a big impact on the story or anything, but come on, it's like Footloose. It's Footloose in Avatar. That's awesome. You get to see some chemistry between Katara and Aang. You get to see that the Fire Nation kids aren't evil. They just live in kind of an evil country, something like what the kids living in Nazi Germany back in the day would have been like. And it's kind of an interesting perspective, but mainly I just included this episode because it's plain fun. It's just a really feel good, just like lighthearted, plain good old fun. Okay, my number 6 pick is Book 2, Chapter 10, The Library. So I'm a little biased on this one because this is the very first episode of Avatar I ever watched. I was flipping through channels as a little kid, and me and my brother stumbled upon Avatar, and this was the episode that was on, and we loved it, obviously. But even if that weren't the case, this would still be on my top 10 list. I mean, the general concept of a giant owl dragon spirit with a hidden library of infinite knowledge is pretty awesome. But it's also a very critical episode. For example, it's the first time that we get introduced to the Day of Black Sun. It's when Appa gets stolen, and it has some cool foreshadowing to the lion turtle that pops up in the finale. And I think that was a really cool, just like small little detail that is really fun when you're rewatching the show. In general, it's a very unique, attention-grabbing episode, and it's a very important episode for the rest of the series as well. Okay, my number 5 pick. We're in top 5 already. So my number 5 pick is Book 3, Chapter 17, Ember Island Players. So I love this episode. I think it was a genius way for them to recap the entire series right before the finale. And other than that, it's also just plain one of the funniest episodes of the series. It does have some serious moments with Aang and Katara and their relationship and kind of the stress that they're dealing with, but the majority of the episode is fairly lighthearted. But that being said, knowing that this is the final episode before the finale, this episode just carries a lot more weight to it all throughout the process. So like at the end of the play, or in some of those serious moments I was talking about, you really feel like, man, like the pressure's starting to build. And I really like that about this episode, even though it is so funny. Okay, so my number 4 pick is Book 3, Chapters 10 and 11, Day of Black Sun. Another 2-parter, kind of cheating, but you know, it's whatever, I make the rules. I really love this episode because when I was first watching the show, I watched it season 3 when it was airing. And when I was watching this show, I genuinely thought it was going to be the season finale. Like, I thought that Team Avatar was going to win, that this is when they defeat the Fire Lord. But instead, they just get wrecked. I love that this episode highlights kind of the progression that these characters have made. And especially Zuko, his character progression kind of comes to its climax as he decides to switch sides in the war and join Team Avatar, which is just a mind-blowing point in the show for your first time watching. And the moment that he redirects Ozai's lightning, man, that part is so epic. I rewatched that with my brother probably 20 times over when we first saw it. We just thought it was the coolest thing. Because it is. And I also just loved being pleasantly surprised that the series wasn't over yet, that there was still more to come. And yeah, I love that. Top 3, baby! Okay, so my 3rd pick is Book 2, Chapter 15, Tales of Ba Sing Se. Okay, so this episode is purely focused on the characters of the series that we love so much, and not really the overlying story that's kind of the whole Fire Lord and Fire Nation and everything like that. It's just focused on the stories, and I love that. Now, I could talk about this episode for a while, just kind of highlighting the little things I love about each little mini story, but anyone who has watched this episode knows that it's this high because of Iroh's story. In this episode, we're shown how he truly cares for others, he sees the best in people, and how his goal is just making a positive impact on others. I always get teary-eyed at this part.
Little soldier boy, come marching home.
Knowing that this part is coming up.
Little soldier boy, come marching home.
That's one of, if not the absolute most beautiful part of the series for me. That scene right there. I saw an awesome video that highlights a lot about this episode specifically. So I'll link to that down below, or maybe in the iCard up there. So you can go watch that afterwards. It's getting freaking hot in here. Hold on. Okay, we're going open door for number 2. Number 2 is Book 2, Chapter 2, The Cave of Two Lovers. So this episode is darn near perfect. It kicks off the romance between Aang and Katara, and the humor is off the charts in this episode. The traveling nomads are really fun, quirky characters, and they're really memorable for only being in this one episode. And their songs are really funny, but then also really heartfelt. For example, you can't help but smile when Chong sings the love song in the final scene. I don't have much more to say about this episode. I just love it because it's so memorable and iconic, and it just has everything I love about this show all compiled into one episode. Okay, number 1 spot. What do you think it's gonna be? So call me basic, call me predictable, but my number 1 spot is Book 3, chapters 18 through 21, Sozin's Comment, the series finale. Considering how hard it is to give a satisfying ending to the fans of a really great show, I gotta give credit where credit is due, because they did such a good job with this finale. It's basically the perfect ending to the perfect show. I don't even know where to start, because there's just so much I love about this episode. Well, 4 episodes. I'll get my quick nitpick out of the way first. I originally wasn't a fan of how they kind of introduced the lion turtle and Aang's ability to take away bending, just kind of out of nowhere, just in the last little bit. But now, rewatching the show, I kind of really like that even in the last part of the show, we're still learning more about this world and things that can happen, things that even the characters don't know yet. And I love that just highlights that there's still so much more to explore in this world, and I think that adds a lot of magic to the show. This episode brings everything together and shows us how much progress and how much we've really seen from this story so far. We get to see how far these characters have come. I love thinking of the contrast between the first time we meet these characters and then these characters in this finale. Like Zuko and Azula, they go from this little dinky fight between siblings in the first episode of season 2 to this full-out beautiful, just absolutely beautiful Agni Kai. Just takes your breath away every time. It's got a great soundtrack as well. Katara goes from barely being able to lift a puddle in the first episode to just using these awesome techniques in this final battle with Azula as well. Sokka goes from leading an army of like 5-6-year-olds to hijacking and taking down an entire airship fleet. Toph is a boss. Suki is awesome. The White Lotus and Iroh's involvement finally get explained. And there's this really important redemption moment for Zuko when he's finally able to reconnect with Iroh, and they're able to have that little bonding moment. And maybe most importantly, Aang has gone from this goofy, fun-loving kid who's avoiding his responsibility as the Avatar to this true master of the 4 elements. Thinking back to the very first episode, The Boy in the Iceberg, and thinking of all of Aang's progress up until this final finale epic showdown, it really puts into perspective this amazing journey that we were able to be a part of. When you see shots like this, and this, and this,
today, this war is finally over.
You're able to see that he's now become this fully realized Avatar that the world needed, and he's fulfilled that destiny that he needed to fulfill. And speaking of fulfilling, it's such a fulfilling feeling, fulfilling, to see these 4 nations, well, 3, come together and actually have this peace finally after these 3 seasons. Side note, why in tarnation do the swamp people make up a 1/4 of this crowd? There's a lot more I could say about this episode and about all of these episodes, but I think I'm just gonna leave it at that. To put it simply, I can't imagine a better ending to my favorite show. Alright guys, thanks for listening to me talk about my 11 favorite episodes of Avatar The Last Airbender. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like or subscribe if you want to. And like I said before, let me know in the comments your favorite episodes and why. I actually am really curious to know. If you liked the music I was using in this episode, I'll link it down in the description. I made it for my other channel, so you can go check that out. Big thanks to Oats Protection Services for editing this video. Go give him a subscribe, give him a like, give him a view, give him whatever. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.